CBD oil is all the rage right now. Many people are finding it can help alleviate stress and improve their sleep. But if you've tried CBD and wondered whether it was actually doing anything, it probably wasn't. NextEvo Naturals has developed SmartSorb technology, clinically proven to help your body absorb CBD 4 times better than regular CBD. It works faster too. Alana, who works with Casefile, loves NextEvo Naturals gummies. Recently, when she felt really stressed, she took a gummy to help. Almost immediately, Alana felt relief and was calm for the rest of the day. She also loves how they help her fall asleep easier and give her a better quality of sleep. NextEvo Naturals products are backed by more scientific research than any other CBD brand and have been developed by experienced consumer healthcare and pharmaceutical professionals. They're also vegan, GMO-free, gluten-free, and derived from 100% US-grown hemp. Stop wondering if CBD is right for you. Try NextEvo Naturals capsules, gummies, mints, and topical creams, clinically proven to be better absorbed by your body. Get 25% off your first order of $40 or more at nextevo.com with promo code CASEFILE. That's 25% off at nextevo.com, promo code CASEFILE. Our episodes deal with serious and often distressing incidents. If you feel at any time you need support, please contact your local crisis centre. For suggested phone numbers for confidential support, please see the show notes for this episode on your app or on our website. Today's episode involves crimes against children and won't be suitable for all listeners. Eduard Trdý lived in the Czech Republic town of Kurim. On Monday, May 7, 2007, Eduard was home alone making some last-minute preparations. His partner had recently given birth, and Eduard was trying to set up a baby monitor before she and their baby daughter were discharged from hospital. At around 11 a.m., Eduard connected the device to his television. He scanned the channel selector, waiting for the live feed from the monitor's video camera to show on the screen. An image did appear, but it wasn't coming from inside Eduard's home. The baby monitor had intercepted another camera's signal. The black and white feed on the television showed a young boy who Eduard didn't know. He appeared content as he sat naked on a concrete floor playing with a roll of duct tape. Believing the baby monitor had a technical fault, Eduard set it aside and carried on with his day. He returned to it later to try again, but it intercepted the same feed from earlier. This time, the naked boy was being fed torn pieces of bread by a woman whose face was out of view. Eduard heard her say, "Here you go," but didn't recognize her voice. It dawned on Eduard that the boy's hands were tied behind his back. Eduard told his partner what he'd seen, and they decided that they should notify the authorities. Before doing so, Eduard switched on the baby monitor and TV to assess the situation one last time. This time, the boy was clearly hogtied and licking what appeared to be vomit from the floor. In the summer of 2005, 28-year-old Klara Mauerova was working at a youth centre in the Czech city of Brno. The centre was run by her older sister, Katarina, who approached Klara one day to discuss a child who had just arrived from Norway. Her name was Anička. She was around 12 years old, sickly, and in need of special foster care. Katarina believed her sister would make an ideal foster mother for the girl. It wasn't an unusual thought. Klara Malorova was successfully raising her sons, 7-year-old Jakub and 5-year-old Andrei, as a single mother. The boys attended the same youth centre where their mother worked, participating in games, sporting activities, and language studies. Energetic and sporty, Andrei loved hockey. His older brother, Jakub, played basketball as well as the flute. He was an avid reader who was especially fond of dinosaurs. Klara's other sister, Gabriela, spent time with the family at least twice a week. She described her nephews as sweethearts and Klara as a great mother and a role model. Working at the youth centre had fostered Klara's interest in child education, and she was in the process of gaining professional teaching qualifications. Balancing studies with everyday life wasn't easy. Jakub and Andrei often had to accompany their mother on her class field trips. They'd also hang around campus, quietly entertaining themselves while Klara completed her assignments. It was chaotic, but life was good and the boys were happy. Klara's university supervisor, who had met Jakub and Andrei many times, noted that Klara was raising her boys beautifully. After Klara's sister told her about Anička, Klara went to meet the girl. She found her painting in the woods by the youth centre. Anička was short and very thin, with mousy brown hair and glasses. She spoke quietly and nervously in a mixture of Czech and Norwegian. While she didn't reveal much about herself, Klara could tell that the girl was severely traumatized. Klara spent the next few weeks building a rapport with Anička, who eventually opened up about her past. Following the death of her parents, Anička was placed in an orphanage where she was mistreated by those who ran the facility. Eventually, Anička, along with some other children, had been sold into a pedophile ring and endured horrendous acts of sexual abuse and torture. She had also been forced to participate in the torture of the other children. When the pedophile ring was finally exposed, Anička was sent to Katarina Malorova's Centre for Children, as she had no parents or guardians to claim her. Anička was being treated by Andrei Zanalov, a psychiatric doctor from Azerbaijan who specialised in helping children with traumatic histories. He allowed Klara to take a look at Anička's medical file. Dr. Zanalov explained that in addition to her psychological traumas, Anička also had leukemia. In his opinion, she would be lucky if she lived to the age of 16. From around September 2005, Anička began living with Klara full-time. As part of this new arrangement, Klara's sister Katarina took Anička to the hospital for chemotherapy sessions. Dr. Zanalov continued to treat Anička remotely, sending therapy and care instructions to Klara via email and text messages. It wasn't long before Klara wanted to formally adopt Anička. 12 months later, in October 2006, Klara and Katarina Malorova sat in the office of Brunet's deputy ombudsman. Katarina had used her standing as the director of a youth centre to arrange the meeting. The sisters explained that they had spent the previous year doing everything they could to have Anička adopted by Klara. Unfortunately, their efforts were hindered due to the fact that Anička didn't possess a birth certificate or passport. Without legal identification, it was almost impossible for Klara to adopt Anička. The sisters had approached multiple institutions seeking help, but no one was willing or able to assist them. One was the Endangered Children Fund, a non-government, non-profit organisation that provided social and legal protection to children in the Czech Republic. In order to receive their help, Anička needed to stay at the fund's children's shelter while her case progressed. Given Anička's traumatic history and ill health, Klara and Katerina expressed their concern that such an upheaval could have devastating effects. From a procedural standpoint, the Deputy Ombudsman should have referred Anička's case to departmental social workers. However, she agreed that removing Anička from her foster family was not in her best interests. The Deputy Ombudsman provided the Maurova sisters with advice on how to proceed. The first step was for Anička's age to be verified. Over the course of several weeks, Katerina accompanied Anička to University Hospital in Brno, where she was subjected to various medical examinations. X-rays of her forearm and hands were taken, and her DNA was also tested. It was determined that Anička was between the ages of 13 and 14. Armed with a medical certificate confirming Anička's age, the Maurova sisters applied to Brno's municipal court. They sought a judicial ruling on whether Anička could remain with Klara and be legally adopted by her. The hearing was scheduled for March the following year of 2007. As part of the court process, social workers inspected Klara's small flat in Brno. They found everything to be in order. By January, Klara had moved her family into a larger two-storey terraced house on a quiet street in Kurim, 15 kilometres north of Brno. The house was arranged and paid for by Anička's doctor, Andrei Zanalov, with the help of Klara's sister, Katerina. Klara made sure that Anička felt at home, painting her room bright yellow and filling it with toys. Anička's case was heard in the municipal court on March 26. The presiding judge reviewed all the relevant medical and social work documents, as well as some additional reports Katerina had commissioned in support of Klara's application. Both sisters provided statements, and Anička was interviewed by the judge. In reaching her decision, the judge concluded that Anička's biological mother was likely a drug addict who had given birth to Anička at home. As Anička had never attended school, it was unlikely there were any formal records in her name. The judge granted Anička the legal birth date of December 2, 1993, making her 13 years, 3 months, and 24 days old. A birth certificate would be created, and Anička finally had legal recognition. Klara's application for adoption was also approved. Anička was given Klara's surname, Maurova. 6 weeks later, on Monday, May 7, 2007, a call was placed to the Kurim police. The caller was a local man named Eduard Trdý. He had been attempting to connect a baby monitor to his television when it intercepted another camera. Its footage showed a naked boy hogtied on a concrete floor. Eduard had started recording the live feed to preserve evidence, which he then showed police when they arrived at his house. Given the operating range of the baby monitor was only about 30 to 50 metres, police believed the boy must be in a neighbouring house. As one officer focused on the footage, he recognised a song playing in the background. Realising that if they knew which house the music was coming from, they might find the boy, the officers turned down the television's audio. They then pressed their ears to cups they held against the walls. The cups amplified sound, allowing them to hear noises from the houses that shared a wall with Eduard's home. Emanating from behind one wall was the same song that was captured in the footage. Eduard wasn't familiar with the neighbours on that side and had never seen any boys coming in or out of their house. Officers attended the property and 2 women aged in their 30s answered the front door. They refused police requests to enter the premises. Although the officers didn't have a search warrant, the situation was exceptional. Ignoring the women's protests, the police forced their way in and came across a storage cupboard beneath a staircase. It was padlocked. The women insisted that no one was in there, but refused to hand over a key. They had to be pulled away from the cupboard as police began trying to remove the padlock. Suddenly, a young girl in pajamas ran into the room screaming, "Mama, Mama." After hugging one of the women, the girl started holding onto the officers' legs, hindering their efforts to access the locked cupboard. The padlock was eventually removed and the cupboard opened. Inside was a dark room, about 2 meters by 2 meters in size. It had no ventilation and an odor of vomit and feces wafted out. A bucket sat in one corner. There was little else aside from a high-tech security camera that was actively recording the space. Next door, Eduard Trdý's eyes were glued to his television. When police had begun knocking at his neighbour's door, the footage of the little boy had abruptly gone dark. Someone had suddenly turned off a light within the confined space. Now that a door had been opened, light filtered back in. Eduard watched live as it illuminated the naked, restrained boy. Police scooped him up, removed his restraints, and took him to a waiting ambulance. The boy's name was Andrei, and he was 7 years old. He told officers that he was kept in the cupboard under the stairs while his mother, Klara Maurerova, and his sister, Anichka Maurerova, lived freely in the rest of the house. The other woman at the home when police arrived was Andrei's aunt, Katerina Maurerova. She visited often. Neither Klara nor Katerina inquired about Andrei's welfare following his rescue. Klara Maurerova was placed under arrest for child abuse and was remanded in custody as an investigation commenced. Klara's other son, 9-year-old Jakub, wasn't at the family home when police stormed the premises. Concerns for his welfare grew, even more so upon the discovery of a locked garden shed in the yard. Gaps in its frame were covered by the same type of duct tape that had been used to bind Andrei's hands and feet. The police broke in, but Jakub was not inside. He was soon located and deemed safe. As their home life was investigated, Jakub, Andrei and Anichka were sent to a children's shelter in Brno run by the Endangered Children Fund. During their first day, Anichka remained withdrawn and fearful of social interactions, while her brothers played together and appeared to be adjusting. By the following afternoon, Andrei began exhibiting post-traumatic stress and high levels of anxiety. He was returned to hospital where he was stabilised and held for further observation. That evening, staff at the shelter commenced their nightly rounds as the children slept. They found Jakub sound asleep in the room he shared with Anichka, but her bed was empty. A search of the facility failed to locate her. It was soon realised that one of the windows in Anichka's room was open. It was not possible for a child to open the window on their own. Casefile will be back shortly. Thank you for supporting us by listening to this episode's sponsors. Here in Australia, spring has just arrived, making it an ideal time to head outdoors. And for listeners in the Northern Hemisphere, you'll want to make the most of every warm day and enjoy the autumn colours as they arrive. Whether you're going for a run or a hike, or just going shopping, the tree runners from Allbirds are your go-to sneakers for stepping out and soaking up the great outdoors. Why are they called tree runners? Because they're made out of eucalyptus tree fibre, which is a silky soft material that's both lightweight and breathable. This premium natural material is better for you and the planet. I love my Allbirds tree runners. They provide great support, but at the same time, they're really soft and comfortable. That means I don't get sore feet no matter how far I walk. They come in a variety of colours but are also designed without any unnecessary frills or logos, so they go with pretty much anything. And if you're lucky enough to be travelling soon, the fact that the Allbirds tree runners are super lightweight makes them the perfect sneakers to take along on any adventure. Find your new favourite shoes for sunny days and upcoming travel at allbirds.com. That's ALLBIRDS.com. According to crime data, the average home break-in lasts between 8 and 10 minutes. That's why you need a home security system that responds quickly and forcefully. For the Casefile team, that's SimpliSafe Home Security. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. They protect you with cutting-edge security technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. Here's why I love it. With 24/7 professional monitoring, SimpliSafe's agents call you the moment a threat is detected and dispatch police or first responders in an emergency even if you're not home or can't be reached. Their monitoring experts use proprietary advanced response technology to visually confirm when a break-in is real, so you can get the highest priority police dispatch. SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection, with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. There are HD security cameras for inside and outside, as well as smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real. SimpliSafe even has hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/casefile. Go today and claim a free indoor security camera plus 20% off with interactive monitoring. Go to simplisafe.com/casefile. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Hundreds of police officers searched for Anichka Maurarova. She was known to feel comfortable in the wilderness, so a helicopter with heat-seeking capabilities scoured nearby wooded areas. A spokesperson for the children's shelter publicly voiced concern that Anichka had been kidnapped and said they were worried about her fragile health. Meanwhile, with his brother hospitalised and sister missing, 9-year-old Jakub remained at the children's shelter alone. None of his relatives were permitted to visit him, so he was mostly left to his own devices. As he watched television one day, Jakub saw the footage of his brother's imprisonment. It had been leaked to the media, along with a statement Andrei gave police that detailed his ordeal. In his statement, Andrei said he'd been abused for a long time in a number of locations and by more people than just his mother. Eventually, Jakub revealed to police that he too had been treated the same way. It all began shortly after Anička was brought into their home in the autumn of 2005. Klara Mauerova cared for Anička on the instruction and guidance of Anička's doctor, Andrei Zanarlov. He said that in order for Anička to heal from her past trauma, she would need to feel completely safe and welcome in Klara's home. Klara had to lavish Anička with attention, praise, and reassurance. Dr. Zanarlov also diagnosed Anička with a condition that caused spinal fluid to build up, but could be treated with massage therapy. Klara was instructed to regularly massage Anička's entire body. The doctor explained that massaging Anička's intimate areas would also desensitize and reprogram her past sexual trauma. Over time, Anička began to improve, but Klara's efforts to help the young girl had become an obsession. She began neglecting her sons, often sending them to stay with their grandparents. By the summer of 2006, Klara had been trying to adopt Anička without success for almost 9 months. Meanwhile, Dr. Zanarlov was growing concerned about the family's situation. Anička had told him that Andrei and Jakub were being mean to her, and he felt that she would never truly be a part of the family if they didn't accept her. He recommended that Klara use corporal punishment against her sons to make them behave. Starting in July 2006, Klara dutifully began to beat Andrei and Jakub with a wooden spoon and a metal belt buckle. The boys were also made to kneel for hours at a time, or else be locked in a cupboard with no food, water, or toilet access. At night, they had to sleep on a mat on the floor. They were completely isolated from family and friends. This abuse continued for around 5 weeks. Then, Dr. Zanarlov advised Klara to bring the boys to a cottage in Vavrska Batishka, a town about 20 kilometers northwest of Brno. There, the re-education would begin. Andrei and Jakub arrived at the cottage in late August 2006. It was an isolated property at the end of a small country lane on the outskirts of town. Trees concealed the residence from view. The boys' aunt, Katerina Mauerova, was already there when they arrived. She'd brought with her 2 dog cages, one for each brother. They were locked in the cages, which forced them to remain bent or kneeling and unable to move. They were only fed scraps of food and were not released to use the bathroom. If they tried to communicate with one another, they were beaten. That night, the first re-education session began. The boys were bound, blindfolded, and beaten. Klara scratched and stabbed her sons with a fork and forced their heads underwater while Katerina held them in place. Andrei and Jakub had to memorize vulgar passages and were hurt if they failed to recount them word for word. The torture continued into the next day. As well as being victimized, Andrei was also made to hurt his brother. But when Anička accused Andrei of physically harming her, he bore the brunt of the abuse. At one point, Anička even joined in. While Dr. Andrei Zanarlov wasn't present at the cottage, he kept in touch with Klara via text messages and emails. When Klara informed him that Andrei's re-education was not working, Dr. Zanarlov devised a plan. As per the doctor's orders, Klara handed Andrei a glass of water and told him to give it to Jakub, who was thirsty. Andrei did as instructed, and Jakub drank from the glass. He was then taken away. Andrei was then informed that the water he had just given his older brother was actually poison. He was led outside to the back of the cottage where Jakub's lifeless body lay in a freshly dug grave. Andrei was told that if he behaved himself and obeyed all instructions, then Jakub would come back to life. Andrei promised to be good, and Jakub, who'd been forced to play dead by the adults, got up. Dr. Zanarlov reassured Clara that these re-education practices were scientifically proven to be effective in modifying bad behaviour, and insisted that the program was nearly complete. His next demand was for Clara to burn Andrei's buttocks, cut off a piece of the wounded flesh, and force the young boy to eat it. This was too far for Clara, who couldn't carry out the order. Disappointed in her, Dr. Zanarlov decided to send out reinforcements. 2 men and a woman soon arrived at the cottage. 29-year-old Jan Turek was a scout leader at Katerina Mauerova's Centre for Children. His friend, 23-year-old Jan Shklova, occasionally worked there as an assistant. The woman was 26-year-old Hanna Bashova. She too was a scout leader at the centre. Andrei and Jakub knew her as Aunt Nancy. Clara Mauerova handed her sons over to Turek, Shkla and Bashova. She thanked them for the work they were about to do, then left. Turek and Shkla proceeded to gag, strip, restrain, mutilate and torture the boys, as per Dr. Zanarlov's instructions. Meanwhile, Hanna Bashova made lots of noise in the background to give the boys the impression more people were present. When Clara returned, she knelt beside Andrei and Jakub and said that if they ever told anyone what had happened at the cottage, she would bring them back there. Clara took Anichka back to their Brunner flat and continued trying to adopt the girl, while Andrei and Jakub were left with their aunt Katerina, as well as Hanna Bashova and Jan Shkla. They took the boys to an after-school clubhouse in Brunner South, where Katerina, Bashova and Shkla sometimes worked as group leaders. Andrei and Jakub were kept separate and their abuse continued. Their mother never visited, and the boys were not allowed to see or speak to other family members. On September 10, Andrei turned 7. Almost a month later, on October 6, Jakub had his 9th birthday. Then, 4 months into the brothers' imprisonment at the clubhouse, things changed. In December, Andrei was allowed to live with his mother and Anichka in their new house in Kurim. Jakub remained at the clubhouse. As time wore on, he was sometimes permitted to attend school, but was threatened into remaining silent about the abuse. Meanwhile, 15 kilometers away in Kurim, Andrei was kept naked and bound in a small, windowless storage cupboard under the stairs. No one suspected anything was wrong in the Mauerova household until May 2007, when neighbour Eduard Trdý connected his baby monitor to his television. Andrei and Jakub's bodies were riddled with burns, scratches and scars. Both boys exhibited symptoms of post-traumatic stress, as well as phobias and other developmental mood and sleep disorders. Their ability to concentrate was impaired, and they grappled with feelings of loneliness, isolation, guilt, and abandonment. Psychologists determined that Andrei and Jakub would require long-term, if not lifelong, psychological care. Despite what they had endured, the brothers were remarkably resilient. They started school within days of their rescue. Andrei was homeschooled at the children's shelter while Jakub attended in-person classes. Their older sister, Anichka, didn't cope as well. While she hadn't endured any of the abuse instigated by Dr. Andrei Zanalov, she was very unsettled in the shelter that was supposed to be their refuge. Then she vanished altogether. 9 days later, 3 identical envelopes arrived at the Brno Ombudsman's office, the Mlada Fronta Dnes newspaper, and the office of the Czech Republic's president. Each contained a photocopy of the same 9-page handwritten letter, dated 6 days earlier and signed with the name Anichka Mauerova. It read, "My mother is not at all bad, as shown on television and in the newspapers. I don't understand everything, but I will write the truth as I know it. Please forgive my mother. I know that the police and everyone are looking for me, but I'm afraid of everyone. Nobody wants to hear how it really was." The letter detailed Anichka's time living with Clara, Andrei and Jakub. She insisted that Andrei was not abused or locked away. She accused Andrei of lashing out at her, mostly at night when there was no one around to witness it. He had threatened Anichka to stay quiet, saying that she would be taken away if she spoke up. The letter explained that Clara desperately wanted Andrei to treat Anichka nicely. She feared that his misbehaviour would compromise Anichka's adoption. Upon learning that her adoptive mother could be imprisoned for 8 years, Anichka fled the children's shelter. Her letter didn't shed any light on where she was currently. However, postage marks indicated the envelopes were sent from a town just north of Brno. The country's president expressed skepticism that the letter was penned by a 13-year-old. Psychologists agreed that an adult had likely helped Anichka write it, then deliver it to the post office. Anichka's former room at the children's shelter in Brno was thoroughly inspected by forensic investigators in an effort to identify the person who had facilitated her escape. They swabbed surfaces and were able to detect foreign DNA, which was cross-checked against everyone embroiled in the case. While it wasn't a direct match to anybody involved, it was a familial match to Jan Shkla. He had joined in the abuse of Andrei and Jakub at the Vaverska Batishka cottage. The DNA belonged to his older sister, 32-year-old Barbora Shklova. Like her brother, Barbora Shklova worked at Katerina Mauerova's youth centre. The amount of Barbora's DNA found throughout Anichka's room indicated she must have lived there for a number of days. Though Barbora's current whereabouts were unknown, investigators were certain that she was with Anichka Mauerova. Anichka Mauerova's disappearance was covered extensively in Czech newspapers. Articles featured a photo of a smiling Clara Mauerova with an arm around Anichka's shoulders. Anichka's brown hair was parted down the middle, with each half woven into thin braids. She looked nervous, with an emotionless face and a downward gaze. Upon seeing this photograph, a staff member at Katerina Mauerova's youth centre phoned the police. She reported that the person next to Clara Mauerova was not a teenage girl named Anichka. She was actually a woman who had worked at the centre for the last 7 years. Her name was Barbora Shklova. Casefile will be back shortly. Thank you for supporting us by listening to this episode's sponsors. When we decide we want to lose weight, it's usually not just about the number on the scale. Some people are motivated by the thought of keeping up with their kids. Others might be focused on improving their energy levels or their mental health. Whatever your reason is for wanting to make a change, Noom Weight is ready to help. Ever since Jess started with Noom Weight, her life has changed for the better. It started with Jess just wanting to lose weight, but her fitness has improved too, and along with the dropping kilos, she's also training to run 5 kilometers. She's having fun and feels great. Jess tells me she used to be an all-or-nothing kind of dieter and exerciser. She'd go in with 100% effort, and if she slipped up once or missed a day at the gym, then she would just give up. But Noom Weight is okay with having an off day. It's all about progress, not perfection. And their psychology-based approach empowers users with the knowledge and support they need to build lasting results. Start building better habits for healthier long-term results. Sign up for your trial at noom.com/casefile. That's noom.com/casefile to sign up for your trial. It can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with one of life's challenges. But when you learn how to find your own solutions, there's no better feeling. A therapist can help you become a better problem solver, making it easier to accomplish your goals, no matter how big or small. As our regular listeners would know, the Casefile team have been using BetterHelp for a while now. We know how important it is to take care of our minds so we can continue to deliver quality content. Becoming clear on how we can face challenges also helps us achieve the goals we want to as a team. We found that chatting with BetterHelp's therapists has been really helpful. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. Get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey and switch therapists anytime. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/casefile today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/casefile. What do you think of when you hear the phrase high-quality meals? For me, it's all about having ingredients that are ethically sourced as well as healthy and delicious. ButcherBox takes the guesswork out of finding high-quality meat and seafood you can trust. They offer 100% grass-fed beef, free-range organic chicken, pork that's raised crate-free, and wild-caught seafood. Their meats are humanely raised with no antibiotics or added hormones. ButcherBox ships a curated selection of high-quality meat to your home with free shipping for the continental US. You can customize your box to be filled with whatever you want, and it's unbeatable value, with high-quality cuts that are hard to find at the grocery store for affordable prices. They'll also include recipe inspiration, guides, and hacks so you can cook up mouth-watering meals. Sometimes they'll even personalize these once they know what you like. Take chicken breasts off your grocery list. ButcherBox is offering our listeners an incredible deal that they've never offered before. Free chicken for a year. Get 2 pounds of free-range organic chicken breasts for free in every order when you sign up at butcherbox.com/casefile and use code CASEFILE. Claim this deal at butcherbox.com/casefile and use code CASEFILE. Thank you for listening to this episode's ads. By supporting our sponsors, you support Casefile to continue to deliver quality content. Barbora Shklova was the eldest of 3 children. Her mother was a doctor who had a severe drinking problem, and her father was mostly absent, choosing to prioritise his work as a boys' youth group leader. Barbora found solace in nature as she generally felt uncomfortable around people. Growing up, she was treated for neurological and cardiac conditions as well as epilepsy. She also had an underactive thyroid which inhibited her physical growth. No matter her age, Barbora had a tendency to form childlike attachments to others. When Barbora was in her early 20s, she met Katerina Mawarova. The young women became friends and eventually moved in together. At 26, Barbora started work as an educator at the youth centre Katerina ran. Barbora's younger brother Jan was also hired sometime later. In 2005, with the assistance of Katerina Mawarova, Barbora began creating a new identity for herself as a 13-year-old named Anichka. They invented a backstory for the fictional Anichka, one so traumatic it would elicit compassion from others and be difficult to disprove. Barbora spent months starving herself until she lost half her weight and had the appearance of a sickly teen. She wore children's clothing, hats, and colourful eyeglasses, and styled her hair in ways popular with teens. Then, in the summer of 2005, Katerina introduced Anichka to her younger sister, Klara. For the next 2 years, Barbora played the role of Anichka to perfection. The stories about her deceased parents, time spent in an orphanage, and the abuse by a pedophile ring were all made up, as was her leukemia diagnosis. Katerina gave Klara fake medical documentation to support Anichka's cancer diagnosis. She would regularly collect Barbora from Klara's home, claiming she was taking Anichka to chemotherapy. Although she never attended the hospital, Barbora would return looking weak, wrapped in a blanket with tubes sticking out of her. Anichka's psychiatrist, Dr. Andrei Zanalov from Azerbaijan, didn't exist either. While never conclusively established, it was thought that Barbora's younger brother, Jan Shklar, played this role. He had disguised himself and produced fraudulent credentials when meeting Klara. Anichka's medical file that he let her read was also fake. The deputy ombudsman who assisted the Mawarova sisters, the doctors who examined Anichka and submitted reports to the court, and the judge who gave Anichka a legal identity and formalised her adoption were all deceived as well. The judge had made her decision based on false medical reports. The doctors who examined Anichka took x-rays and samples of her DNA and had correctly determined that their patient was between the ages of 13 and 14. However, their patient had not been Barbora Shklova masquerading as Anichka. Katerina had duped a friend and used his 13-year-old daughter to impersonate Anichka during the assessment. Klara was aware of this specific con and went along with it, based on the guidance of Dr. Andrei Zanalov. He explained that if the real Anichka attended the examination, then doctors would discover her leukemia and the adoption application would be immediately rejected. All of the emails and text messages from Dr. Zanalov to Klara were later found to have originated from accounts belonging to Katerina Mawarova. Every instruction to abuse Andrei and Yakub had come from their own aunt. Barbora Shklova, as Anichka, abetted the abuse by saying the brothers were harming her. Klara Mawarova insisted that she was completely oblivious to the web of deceit woven by her sister. She was unaware that her cancer-stricken teenage daughter was in fact a woman in her early 30s. In a media statement, Clara said, "All my actions of which I am accused were led and directed by other persons whose identity was kept secret from me and who at the same time took advantage of my very bad mental state into which they brought me and in which they kept me." Clara was supported by her parents and other sister, Gabriella, who condemned Katerina. They claimed that Katerina, both directly and via the fictional doctor, had kept Clara in a constant state of fear. Clara was led to believe that if she didn't follow the orders of those she trusted, Anichka would die. Clara Mawarova, quote, "Until the last moment, I believed that the doctor would show up and everything would be explained. That I was just helping Anichka and that it made sense. I have nothing now. I just hurt my kids terribly and ruined their lives." In the weeks and months after Andrei and Jakub were rescued, those responsible for their suffering were located and arrested. The boys' mother and their aunt faced abuse and torture charges, as did Centre for Children's staff members Jan Turek, Jan Shkla, and Hanna Bashova. However, Barbora Shklova was still missing. The last anyone had heard of her was the letter she'd sent to the country's president, deputy ombudsman, and a national newspaper, while still masquerading as Anichka. On Friday, June 15, nearly 5 weeks after she had fled the shelter, Barbora Shklova showed up at the Czech embassy in the Danish capital of Copenhagen. She was accompanied by her father, their lawyer, and 2 journalists. Barbora had been laying low in the city for about a month. At the embassy, she provided ID and requested that hair and saliva samples be taken in order to prove that she was Barbora Shklova. After Barbora and her entourage left, embassy staff contacted the authorities in the Czech Republic. Despite her stated fear of people and the media, Barbora arranged an interview with the Lidové Noviny newspaper. She admitted to her fictitious life as Anichka. She felt happier and more comfortable being Anichka and preferred the way people treated her when they thought she was young. Barbora said that the original intention behind the con was to supervise the children at Katerina Mawarova's youth centre while blending in with them. The situation then, quote, evolved to her inserting herself into Clara Mawarova's life and family. She didn't elaborate any further. Barbora denied that Clara abused her sons. She claimed that Andrei had only been locked up for a short time on the day he was discovered and was disciplined on just one other occasion. Barbora held little sympathy for Andrei, implying that his punishment was rightly deserved. When pressed on that point, Barbora claimed that the then 6-year-old Andrei had beaten both her and Jakub. She couldn't explain what prompted the attack, only that Andrei had suddenly started shouting, "Kill Jakub, kill Anichka." Barbora remarked, "Andrei has such power that no one would believe it. He has enormous power." Barbora had no plans to return to the Czech Republic, saying that she would provide the authorities with a statement through her lawyer. When asked if she would continue being Anichka, Barbora said no, Anichka's gone. After this interview, Barbora Shklova disappeared again. Five months later, in December 2007, a 13-year-old boy named Adam Varner, who lived in Oslo, Norway, approached his schoolteachers and confided that he had been abused. Believing the perpetrator was Adam's father, Adam was sent to a children's shelter. Then on Sunday, December 16, Adam vanished. Police were contacted and a nationwide search began. Adam Trdý was eventually located in the Czech Republic, where he was found safe and well with his mother. Adam had never attended school in Norway. Teachers 600 kilometres away in Oslo had no idea that the 13-year-old boy they thought was Adam Trdý was in fact 33-year-old Barbora Shklova. She had stolen Adam's identity and had been masquerading as him for several months. To appear more masculine, Barbora had gained weight, shaved her head, and dressed in loose-fitting, oversized clothes favoured by teenage boys. According to the school's principal, some teachers thought Adam looked more like a girl, but they attributed this to 13 being a tricky age. Barbora was eventually tracked down north of Oslo and arrested. She was transported back to the Czech Republic, where she was photographed being led into a police station clutching a children's book and teddy bear. Barbora was charged for the abuse of Ondřej and Jakub. The prosecution and defence had Barbora examined by their own experts. The prosecution's expert concluded that Barbora didn't suffer from any psychological conditions. Rather, she was an expert at manipulating the people around her. The defence's expert disagreed, claiming that Barbora was mentally ill and in need of treatment. To resolve the matter, the court ordered its own evaluation. Their panel of 8 independent psychologists and psychiatrists assessed Barbora and found she had no signs of mental illness. Barbora was declared competent to stand trial, as were her co-accused, Klara Mauerova, Katarina Mauerova, Hanna Bashova, Jan Turek, and Jan Škla. They had all been charged with the abuse of Ondřej and Jakub. Klara, Katarina, Hanna Bashova, and Jan Škla were charged with deprivation of liberty, and Jan Turek faced an additional charge of causing bodily harm. Katarina also faced charges for perjury and providing false expert testimony to court when helping Klara adopt Anička. The trial opened with a full read of the indictment, which detailed all of the abuse allegedly perpetrated against Ondřej and Jakub. At the conclusion of the reading, a noticeably thinner Klara Mauerova took to the stand. Sobbing, Klara agreed with everything that had been read from the indictment. She claimed that she had put complete faith and trust in Dr. Andrei Zanalov and her sister Katarina. Quote, "I tried to help Anička, then the problems with the boys' behaviour towards Anička began. I believed that they were serious and I was convinced that I had spoiled them with my education and actions, that Ondřej was behaviourally sick and would not have a normal life. I was grateful to the doctor for offering to help me with my boys. I wanted very much to help Anička too, so that we could be like a family. I believed that if I did everything right and well, I would save Anička, and Ondřej would not have to go to an institution for his bad behaviour, and that Jakub would be a good person." Despite claims previously made by Barbora Shklova, Klara admitted that Ondřej was almost always locked inside the cupboard under the stairs at their Kurim house. He was only let out on rare occasions as a reward for good behaviour. Klara's maternal focus was so warped that by the time police banged on her front door to rescue Ondřej, she actually feared they were there to take Anička away. In trying to explain her actions, Klara stated, "I hurt my children, but I didn't want to hurt them. I tried to be a good mother. I never liked violence. Terrible things happened. I am aware of it, and I cannot understand how I could have allowed it." Psychological experts testified that Klara Mauerova had a tendency to make decisions based on emotions and feelings alone. They acknowledged that the constant and increasing pressure placed on her caused a, quote, kind of brainwashing. Although they conceded that Klara did not suffer from any disorders and was able to control her actions, they agreed that she had been deceived, abused, and manipulated. Klara was the only defendant who admitted to her actions. The others fully denied the allegations against them. Barbora Shklova testified briefly in person, and the rest of her statement was read out by the judge. She stated that she was not a perpetrator of deception or abuse, but a victim of it. She claimed that she had been repeatedly locked up, beaten, tied to tables, sexually abused, and cut with knives by the Mauerova sisters and Hanna Bashova. Other strangers took part as well. Barbora also claimed that sometimes Andrei would stab her and beat her with a stick. Barbora's brother, Jan Shklar, said that he had seen evidence of injuries and abuse on Barbora's body. However, the 8 independent psychologists and psychiatrists who assessed Barbora had concluded, quote, "Barbora Shklova suffers from histrionic personality disorder, which is accompanied by theatricality, dramatization, exaggerated expression of emotions, and manipulative behaviour to achieve one's own needs." The panel also believed Barbora's supposed history of seizures had been caused by convulsions associated with a dissociative disorder, not epilepsy. They determined that Barbora did not have multiple personality disorder, as she consciously and purposefully played the role of Anichka and later Adam. It was their opinion that for the purpose of the trial, Barbora was once again playing the role of a victim. As the trial drew to a close, Katerina Mauerova told the court that she could no longer sit quietly while accusations were made against Barbora. Katerina admitted that in 2005 she introduced Barbora to her sister. She said that she had mistakenly called Barbora Anichka and referred to her as being younger. It was then Katerina helped Barbora develop the Anichka identity. Katerina encouraged Klara to bond with Anichka, though claimed that Klara allowed herself to be convinced by Anichka's story. Katerina denied Barbora ever participated in or influenced the abuse of Andrei and Jakub. She told the court that in the summer of 2006, she and Klara devised the punishments used against the boys based on instructions from a person she described as someone whom we trusted without limit. She wouldn't admit to writing the emails and text messages sent by Dr. Andrei Zanalov. Katerina claimed that the goal was to simply educate the boys, but that things got out of hand. During Katerina's testimony, Klara shouted at her sister, accusing her of lying and demanding to know why she had done this. Klara then collapsed and was removed from the courtroom. After Katerina finished her statement, she refused to answer any questions from the prosecution or the judge. In late October 2008, the 6 defendants were found guilty of all charges. For their role in the abuse, Jan Turek, Jan Shklar, and Hanna Bashova were sentenced to 5, 7, and 7 years in prison, respectively. The boy's mother, Klara Mawarova, was given 9 years. Reflecting the leadership role she played, the boy's aunt, Katerina Mawarova, was sentenced to 10 years. Barbora Shklova was given a 5-year sentence. All of the defendants except Klara appealed, and all were rejected. This crime, which has since come to be known as the Kurim case, remains surrounded by rumours and speculation. Despite messages from Dr. Andrei Zanalov encouraging acts of cannibalism, there is no evidence that the abuse escalated that far. Although Andrei was filmed naked while in captivity, investigators believe this was purely for surveillance and not for sexual purposes. There was also speculation that Josef Shklar, the father of Barbora and Jan, was involved in his children's crimes. Josef was once the leader of a Boy Scout group, and according to one former member, he turned the group into an extremist sect. Under the guise of spiritual teachings, Josef invented violent methods for breaking the Scouts down in order to build them back up. Despite there being a similar motive in the treatment of Andrei and Jakub, Josef Shklar hasn't been found to have any involvement in the Kurim case. Following the trial, Andrei and Jakub continued to be cared for at the Brunner Children's Shelter. A court decision in December 2008 lifted the ban on visiting family members, and over time, the boys began to spend more and more time with their biological father and their maternal grandparents. By 2010, the boys lived with their grandparents full-time and were both doing well at school. All of the defendants served their minimum terms of imprisonment and were released on parole. None were permitted to work with children. Barbora Shklova was set free in February 2012 and changed her name soon after. News outlets reported she was living off a disability pension in an undisclosed location and was in the care of psychologists. Katerina Mawarova was released in July 2014 and has kept a low profile since. Andrei and Jakub's mother, Klara Mawarova, left prison 9 months before her sister. According to the court psychiatrist, Klara made impressive psychological progress during her incarceration and was not considered a danger to her children or the community. While she no longer had any custodial rights over her sons, Klara had worked on rebuilding her relationship with them while in prison. After some hesitation on Jakub's part, both he and Andrei wrote letters to her and visited regularly. By the time Klara was released in October 2013, 15-year-old Jakub and 13-year-old Andrei were reportedly happy to have their mother back. Casefile presents a new Spotify-exclusive podcast, Maddie.
No one is ever prepared for a loved one to suddenly disappear. That's the thing about missingness. When someone you love vanishes into thin air, every family that experiences it has to figure it out for themselves.
We started ringing around Matt's friends. What the hell is he not doing at work? And why hasn't he even called them?
I just sat there going, oh my God, oh my God.
Something wasn't right. The Levisons grew more worried by the minute.
He's walking up and down like a caged lion and he's sweating and he's clammy.
The man has no emotions at all.
Towards the end, he wouldn't let Matt out of his sight.
Narrated by Lauren O'Keefe, the founder of the Missing Persons Advocacy Network and host of Casefile Presents podcast, What's Missing?
The police informed Mark and Faye Levison that they no longer considered Matt a missing person.
They told Faye and I that the case had been transferred to homicide.
And he said, I've called the police, I've found a grave, there's a mattock in the bush.
The receipt showed that 2 items had been purchased, duct tape and a Garden Master brand mattock.
I think we were in shock for ages after that. The world just seemed to stand still.
Hear how a family took on the system to try and find justice for their son.
For the very first time, made us feel like the police and us were no longer on the same side.
And then he sat there and said to me it was Matt's lifestyle that had him murdered.
No, I just said the bullshit stops now. That's ridiculous.
Some people in this world never take no for an answer, especially when they're fighting for someone they love.
Nothing was perfect, and we thought, with a chance of finding Matt, it's probably 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million, but it wasn't 0. So we've got to give it a go.
He was never going to win against us. Not for finding Maddie.
Maddie, the latest podcast from Casefile Presents, available September 19th, only on Spotify.
It's not a justice system, it's just a system.